After 29 years of playing the drums, 27 of those professionally, I've learned a ton of things the hard way, and I want to save you that trouble. I'm about to give you a ton of power tips that I have learned over the years by making mistakes, by wasting time, by having arguments I didn't need to have, by losing gigs I shouldn't have lost. These first few have to do with practice space because we spend a lot of time there. And the first thing I'm going to lead with is quality is greater than quantity. In my practice time, I want the quality of my drum practice time to be maximized. It doesn't matter that I have 12 hours to practice if it's 12 random hours. I want to go in with a plan. I want to know what I'm going to work on. I want to know why I'm working on it, and I want to have a system to work through that. Just because you have 4 hours to practice does not always mean you need to practice 4 hours. If you cannot be focused, if you cannot be dialed into what you're doing, you should go do something else. If you find yourself practicing and you're thinking about, whatever, dinner, the email you should have sent, maybe you should go send that email, or maybe you should take the time to put the sticks down and refocus yourself. The quality of your practice is much more important than how much you're getting, and there's tons of studies I can point to. The one you hear me talk about is the role of deliberate practice in the acquisition of expert performance. That's kind of the landmark study on that. This would have saved me so much time when I was younger because I used to think it was just hours and hours and hours. And the first thing people tell me when they meet, they're like, I'm not practicing enough. I need to find more time to practice. I'm too busy. And my first question is, do you really need to find more time to practice, or do you need to make better use of the time that you are practicing? As Zig Ziglar used to say, be a meaningful specific in your practice time, not a wandering generality. I would rather you have a consistent, focused 30 minutes every day than an unfocused, wandering, non-specific 2 hours every day. You're gonna get more done. This next one, I can't overemphasize the importance here. Listen, listen, listen. We have 2 ears, we have 1 mouth. We need to shut up and we need to listen. What do we need to listen to? Mainly music. You should be listening to like 20x the amount of music you're listening to. I'm serious here. Every moment you get that you can listen to music, listen to it. And I have different listening experiences. I have listening music, a lot of it is piano sonatas, things like that, while I'm actually working. Then I have music I listen to while I'm working out. I have music I listen to while I'm working maybe in the yard or doing housework, repairs, whatever you gotta do, just being, having a family and whatever. I have music I listen to for inspiration. I have music I listen to for critical listening. When we're learning music, we should be listening to the song 10 times more than we're sitting here trying to play it, because we gotta get it here before we can get it here. And all too often I see students get a song, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go play the song, and they haven't even really listened to the song beyond once or twice, and they sit down and try to play it, and then they're like, oh, I can't play that song. Of course you can't. You don't know that song. This is a huge power tip. You can make so much use of lost time or wasted time, whether that be like you gotta be on the subway or the bus, you gotta drive your car somewhere. I listen to music all the time in my car. It is the one space that I know it's uninterrupted. I know, okay, I got 25 minutes of drive time, and I'm gonna listen to something. Make use of that time, and if you've got to learn songs on this instrument, you need to be listening to them and charting them out, just quickie charts, before you ever sit down to play this instrument. And then listen comes whenever we're playing with other musicians. Listen, listen, listen to what they're doing. Listen to what they're saying to you. Listen to how it feels. Listen to how you sound whenever you add yourself in there. Listen to recordings. We need to be listening. I'm telling you, these are your biggest asset when you're playing this instrument. This next one goes back to practice time. Be organized in how you work through your material. Don't just say, I want to work through this book in the next 6 months. I want you to sit down and go, okay, how many pages am I doing each week? How many exercises am I doing each day? We need to be organized in how we do that. We need to say, okay, I've got 30 minutes here. 15 of that minutes is going to be spent on, technique. 15 minutes is going to be spent learning this song. I've got an hour. 30 minutes is going to be spent learning my set list for the weekend. 30 minutes is going to be spent going through this online course or whatever that looks like. Be very organized with your practice time. With work, I calendar almost everything I'm doing. I woke up this morning and I knew exactly what I had to do today. I had to record 3 videos for YouTube and I had to record 4 song lessons. It was not a mystery to me. So by the end of the day, all of that's going to get done and more because I calendared it, because I was organized about how I go through it. Spend some time planning your practice time before you jump into it. I learned this one in college. It helped me so much, get so much more done than some of my other peers, and that is split practice sessions are the key to getting more done in your day. Okay, this goes back to the prefrontal cortex, our brain, how it works, our cognitive abilities. That's gonna be your task management, your ability to focus, your goal setting. All of those things have to do with us being able to have a focused practice session. Guess what? It's like a muscle. It's not we don't have tons of it. There's a finite amount that we have every day, and then it's got to recover before your next focused practice session. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can take breaks in between those practice sessions, just like you would, like, let's say in a football team, they do 2-a-days. They do 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, right? When I was in college, I used to wake up early because my wife would go to, she was a school teacher, so we got married when engaged when I was 20, married when I was 21. So, and I would wake up early and start practicing by 6 or 6:30, right? Careful of your neighbors, but I had neighbors that were a little further away. And then by the time I went to my first class at 8:30, 9 o'clock, I already had a couple of hours of practice time in my belt. Then I would practice mid-morning for about 50 minutes, an hour in between classes. Then I would practice after lunch, come back in the afternoon, and then in the evening it was ensembles. So by the time I got done with my day, I literally had 5 to 6 hours of practice time, easy, including ensembles. And I was able to do that without becoming overly exhausted. Also spent those practice sessions focused on different things. So when I showed up in the morning, I knew exactly what I was going to be focusing on. When I showed up in the afternoon, I knew what I was going to be focusing on. So in your day, if you're able to kind of split up in the morning and then the afternoon and do a little bit of a split session, don't think that's a worse way to do it. It's actually a little bit of a better way to do it when it comes to the cognitive and abilities and your focus. And just so you can know, a lot of studies, I can point you to them, but in the morning, we're gonna be better at things that involve like deep thinking, that kind of a thing. In the afternoons, our physical capabilities, when our mental capabilities start waning, our physicalness can pick up. So if you're working on like your speed and dexterity, I would work on that in the afternoon if you choose to do a split practice session. Attack problem areas first. Don't save them for last, because you're gonna get to working on something you think is fun, and then you're going to miss working on the thing you need to work on, okay? If your left hand is less experienced than your right hand, I don't really say weak, it's less experienced. So if it's less experienced, then focus on it. If you're having trouble with your bass drum doubles, lead with that. Lead with your weak links and work on them first and hardest. One of the things I used to do when I would play gigs is right after the gig, while it's fresh on my memory, I would sit in my truck and I would write down the things that were mistakes and the things I needed to work on. So I kept a little journal just right there. I write that down. The next time I sat down to practice, I would focus on those items specifically first. This one was huge for me. It's been huge for a lot of my students. I've got an online drum school. I teach tons of students. We do drum camps here. By the way, we just opened registration for the 2025 season. Go check that out if you want to. But this one is a huge one, and I say it all the time. Practice is not an emotional event. It's really not. I'm not saying you can't get excited to practice. I'm saying we don't need to go into practice and be like, oh, I don't feel good about the progress I'm making, and so I'm not gonna practice. Yeah, whatever. I came in today, and I didn't sleep great last night. I've got to record a ton today. I did not feel like doing it. And then I'm like, you know what? This is not an emotional event. This is not something that needs my emotions involved in it. This is the work I've got to do. I need to buckle up, buttercup, and go do it, right? The same can be said for your practice time. You put on the calendar you were gonna do it. You put down what you were gonna practice, so show up, and whether you feel like it or not, practice through that stuff. Even if you feel bad about your playing, that's fine. Practice through that stuff. Guess what? We're emotional creatures, and that's okay, but we have control over those emotions. They don't have control over us. It's going to sideline your practice time if you let how you're feeling about your drumming determine how much you're going to practice or how focused you are when you are practicing. Consistency is key. This one has really helped me. Look, showing up every day, doing the work, and consistently doing the next hardest thing. That's gonna be how we get better. And you're gonna look back in 3 months and go, holy cow, I can't believe how far I've come. I had a student come to one of the camps recently. They've just blown it up, and they've come to 2 camps a year for 3 years. Their playing is through the roof, light years ahead of what it was a couple of years ago. Now they're playing in a band on the weekends. Like, they're doing all these things that they told me a couple of years ago they wanted to do. Now, why are they able to do that? Consistently showing up, keeping the ball in front of them, and not getting sidelined or sidetracked because they don't feel good about it or they don't feel like they're making progress, and so we're jumping to all this different material. Consistency in showing up, consistency in working on the same material, consistency in marching towards the same goals. This is all very, very important to your development as a drummer. This is a random one, but it helps me still to this day. Avoid large BPM jumps in your practice time. You're practicing something, you got it humming, you're like, oh man, I got this at 60 BPM. Let me try it at 80 BPM. Well, guess what? You can't do it. Why? because you can't play it at 80 BPM. Now, maybe you could if you've really learned it internally well, but you're taking a big risk there, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna frustrate yourself. What's the better way to do it? The better way to do it is slowly stair-step those BPM. So instead of going to 80 from 60, I would go to like 62. And I practiced there for a couple minutes. Okay, got that. Go to 64. I did this with a student recently, and they said, well, I've only got this song. And this isn't making fun of people. I do this all the time. This is just like, this is an example. I could use myself as well. We had a song we were working on, it was a hard song, and they said, well, I've got this at, like 70 something BPM. I said, okay. They said, well, let me just try to play the song and show you. I'm like, well, why would we do that? You can't play. Well, no, just let me try. So they play the song, which is significantly faster than the 72 BPM. They were unable to play it. And so they said, I just get so frustrated. I said, well, it's natural you get frustrated because you can't play it that fast. What we need to do is go to 74 BPM. So we did that. We went to 74 BPM. And what we did by stair-stepping those BPMs was we got to a BPM that was a failure point. And it was about 10 BPMs away from where he was, but it wasn't that far from where the song needed to be. So what it did is like, wow, okay, I'm halfway there. If I get 10 BPMs, I can go up 10 more BPMs, so I'm gonna start there. And if I just get 10 more BPMs, I'll be able to play this song. So what we need to do is stair-step those BPMs and avoid 10, 15, 20 BPM jumps. I mentioned this earlier, when learning music, do most of the work outside of your practice time. Do not show up to your practice time without having listened to the music and try to learn the song, unless you're going to sit there and just listen for a while. I like to do my listening and learning outside of my practice time so that I can come into my practice time and have it be very effective and very productive on the drums. This goes with tuning my drums as well. I don't want to tune them right before I'm going to play them. I would rather tune them a day before or after a practice session, because sometimes that can be a frustrating thing. I also say the same for technology. I'm not going to come in and try to solve some kind of technology thing. I was doing this the other day. I was trying to hook my MIDI piano up to a new software, and it wasn't working. I was like, and I'm like, okay, you broke your rule. You're trying to do technology related work inside of your practice time. Learn that music first before you get to the practice time by listening to it. Write this one down. Goals are the key to feeling consistent progress. You have to have some kind of a goal that you're marching to. What's gonna happen is after a few days of not having a goal, you're going to get discouraged. Why? Because you don't know where you're going. There's no path to take you there. There's no goal. What's the reason? Why am I practicing this song? Why am I practicing this? Why am I practicing that? We have to have a very specific goal. I sat down yesterday to practice for a lesson. I had a very specific goal, and I got into my practice. I was really going at it because I was like, man, I want to get this concept down so that I can teach it better. You have to have a goal for your practice, both long-term and short-term, and that is going to really help you feel motivated and see progress every time you come and sit down to the drums. This next one's related. Set various types of goals so that you are always seeing forward progress related to your drumming. We can set playing goals, musical goals, personal goals, practice goals, speed goals, all these goals. And so then what I do is I look at my practice and I go, well, this isn't as fast as I needed to be, but this is pretty good. I learned this song, I wanted to do that. I still don't have this concept down, but I did make a new contact with a bass player, and that may lead to a band. You see, I have all these little different goals, and so I can, any given day, I can see success. I would even have a goal of showing up for practice so that on your worst day, you at least can go, well, I showed up today and I said I was gonna do that. It's those small wins that get you to where you wanna go. Work on musically relevant items. I did this so much in my early years because I was having to play so much music right off the bat from when I started playing the drums, just due to relationships I developed and situations I just got dropped in that I was fortunate enough to be. And so if I can't see a direct application of music, if I can't see how I'm gonna use it in music I'm playing now or music I wanna play in the future, then it's a no-go for me. Keep your eye on the prize. Now, does that mean we can't practice some technical stuff? No, sure. If you wanna do that, that's fine. At the end of practicing that technical stuff, I always wanna bring it back to, okay, how I know this concept now. How can I apply it to the music that I'm playing so that it sounds musical? Celebrate your daily wins. I was just talking about this with multiple goal sets. You have to celebrate those daily wins. When we come here for camps, I start every day, the first session I start, I say, what were your wins from yesterday? Because what we need to do is we need to point to something that went well. We need to point to something we did better. Because if we don't, we're always just banging our head against the wall trying to learn something new, and we're never giving ourselves a break and giving ourselves a pat on the back. Gotta celebrate those daily wins. When we get on weekly calls with my students in my online drum program, it's one of the first things I ask. I'm like, hey, let's start with daily wins. Who's got a win? We always have people raising their hands. Keep a practice journal. It's very simple. It'll take you 3 to 4 minutes every day. You're gonna write down what the date is, what you worked on, what the BPMs were, what the problems were, any progress you saw, where you're going to start the next day, and how you felt about the session. It's very, very simple. We don't have to go in depth and journal about our life. It's simply a place that the next day we walk in and we go, oh, here's what I worked on yesterday. Oh yeah, okay, I see, I'm gonna work on this. I said I was gonna pick up there. Boom, you have your marching orders. They're directly related to the goals that you set, and you're constantly tracking them because you can see on that practice journal. It's really fun to go back and look years later at the practice journals you've kept because you see something you were struggling with at the time and you go, man, I'm killing that now. It really does encourage you. This is a huge one. I tell my students all the time, regularly record yourself. Not only regularly record yourself, but this is related to the next one, and that is regularly review those recordings. Look for quality. Avoid getting emotional over it. So what we wanna do is, we're a scientist. We're discovering things. And all we wanna do is take that recording session, that could be just on your phone or whatever, and we're just listening. And what we're wanting to hear is, what's the quality we hear? Is that the quality I want? We're not looking for good or bad. That's a judgment. And what I want is quality. Is that the quality I want in my playing yet? Is that clean enough? Because if we say, oh, that's bad, that's an undefinable term. But if I say, that's not the quality I want, you can say, well, what is the quality you want? Well, I want those ghost notes to be softer, and I also want them to sit in the pocket a little bit better. That's different than just saying, that's bad. By saying, that's not the quality I want, we're able to quantify what quality we want in our playing. So avoid making these judgments of good, bad, awful, best, and instead look at it for, what's the quality that I want to see in my playing? Recordings, unfortunately, don't lie. One day I may get a tattoo of this one. Play to music every time you sit down. We are musicians first. Please, if you've been playing the drums and going to drum lessons for 6 to 12 months, I've talked to students that are doing this, and this is why I bring it up, and you have not played a song yet, fire that drum teacher. You have my permission to fire the drum teacher. They're not doing their job. You are a musician. You are playing this instrument to play music, so we should always be marching towards some type of music. If you're not playing music, to me, what's the point? So every day that you sit down on the drums, reserve a little time to play some music. That could be a song that you're working on, or it could be already a song that you know, just to play at your end of your practice session. This one will help you really get some results in your practice time quicker than you may have otherwise, and that is, do not gloss over mistakes. Stop and address them right there. If you are playing an exercise and you're playing it incorrectly, do not continue to just repeat the exercise hoping that it corrects itself. Every time you repeat it, you need to be addressing, you need to be creating what's called a feedback loop. So as you're playing it, you're thinking about the mistakes you just made and how you're going to change that the next time. If you can't do that in real time, put a gap measure. So play the exercise, one measure in between in time, think about the mistakes, and then jump back into it. I call that a check measure, all right? And so what we're gonna do is check what we were doing with our brain and then tell ourselves the differences that need to happen. Been tons of studies that what you focus on and tell yourself needs to be corrected. Your brain understands that. It understands that you don't like that thing you played, or you do like that thing you played, based upon what you tell it. Going back to those goals, trust the path you have laid out for yourself with your drumming until there is evidence that you should not trust that path. And it needs to be good evidence. If you have sat down for a while and you have made goals and you're like, okay, this is where I want to go. And you took sometimes it takes me a couple days to be like, okay, where am I going? Okay, I want to do this. I think about it. Once I've set those goals, don't let a week go by and you see something cool and you're like, okay, I'm going to completely change every one of my goals. Set those goals and march in that direction. Okay, we underestimate what we can do in a longer period of time, but to do that, we have to set the goals and we have to march towards them with a purpose. Some of you are gonna really like this one. I didn't understand this one when I was younger. Sleep and recreational activities are the key to learning something faster. About 10 to 15% of what we do on the drums is actually in our practice time, and it's the same way in the gym. They'll say the same thing, about 15% of what you do is in the gym. The rest is what you eat, your recovery time, your sleep, all that. It is the same with this. Our brains continue working on this material long after we have left this. They've done scans of the brain while we're sleeping, and what they found is in a different area of the brain, it starts lighting up than was lighting up when we were practicing. And what they see is the same brainwave patterns that they saw when you were awake, actively engaged in the activity. But the difference is, and you can look this up in, there's a book on it, Why We Sleep, I think was a great one. What they found was the exact same brainwave patterns, but they're slowed down to like 50%. So your brain is literally going over what you were practicing in slow motion. This is why you come back the next day and you are able to play that thing better that you could not play the day before. It's not magic. This isn't elves that come and bestow this upon you in the evening. It is your brain continuing to work. And so when you get frustrated with practice, go, you know what, I'm gonna take a break. And what this does is this helps us avoid practice guilt. I talk about this in my course, The Art of Practice. Practice guilt is I feel guilty for not practicing, but now I feel guilty for practicing because I should be spending time with other people. What it does is it goes, okay, there's a healthy balance here. I can practice and that helps me prepare to spend time with other people because I'm getting this thing that I love doing. And I can spend time with other people and sleep and all those things. And that helps me recover from my practice. It's a really great cycle if we'll just get into it and see how that works. This is important for your journey as a drummer. And I say this a lot these days. We underestimate what we can do in a year and we overestimate what we can do in a week. Plug in, do the work, day in, day out. There's a good book called Grit. You should read it. It studies world-class performers, and what they found, these people looked like they had superpowers. And if you looked at any one day over the 10 or 15 years they were learning it, nothing looked special about it. They were doing the next most logical thing. There was no aha moment really with any of them. But what they all had was grit, determination to show up every day and do the next hard thing that would push them towards their goals. And when we magnify that over 10 years and multiply our efforts, it looks like superhuman abilities. You get Michael Phelps and Vinnie Colaiutas. Put the work in and consistently show up. Don't underestimate what you can do in a year or 2 years. And please don't overestimate and get discouraged just because you don't hit some unrealistic goal you set for yourself in a week or a month. Make use of your time outside of your practice time to elevate your practice time. We can do this with critical listening. We can do this with reading magazines, reading books, listening to interviews, studying up on players, etc. All of these are activities that are related to our craft, but they are not practice time. So you can get a ton of music or drum related activities into the day around what your drumming is. You got 45 minutes for lunch, guess what? If it takes you 45 minutes to eat your lunch every day, maybe you're eating too slow, right? Maybe you should take 25 minutes of that and watch a music documentary or read a biography or listen to some music. And I can give you tons of examples of found time throughout the day that we can do this exact same thing. Driving, we mentioned it earlier. Get a good podcast that interviews drummers. Make use of that time. I mentioned this earlier, but work on tuning, setting up your gear, and technical device troubleshooting outside of your practice time. If it is designated practice time, then make it practice on the drums. If it is designated tech or gear time, then do that. But I try not to mix the two because I get real frustrated when I can't get to the creative part. Don't check email, social media, or text messages right before you go into the practice session unless you have the time to respond to them and deal with them right then. It is simply going to be an internal distraction that eventually will become an external distraction. So you're going to go into the practice session thinking about it. So 10 or 15 minutes before you go into practice, try to turn all that off and stop letting that input into you, especially social media. It gives you a very scattered brain. It does for me. Maybe it doesn't do the same for you. We need to go into that practice session and respect that time that we've set aside to do that. I also don't like having connected devices while I'm practicing or at a gig. So that's text, social media, email, all of that. I want the device off. I want to be focused on what I'm doing here because I know that if I'm focused here, that's the quickest way that I can get on and do the other things in life that I also want to do. This is kind of a power move I learned when I was in college. I was newly married. Take advantage of your breaks during your practice time. Let's say you plan to practice for 2 hours. You should take a break in that time, right? Let's say I'm going to practice 50 minutes and I'm going to take a 10-minute break. So you take that 10-minute break. Well, what do? Instead of scrolling social media, do something that helps you recover your cognitive functions. And there's only a couple things and activities that help you do that. One of them is interacting with nature. So just going outside, simply looking at nature helps with that. Another one is physical activities. So I really used this in the form of, because I was a newlywed, right? She's at work and I'm in school and I needed to help around the house. So I would designate, I'm gonna vacuum these 2 rooms while, I'm recovering. I'm gonna wash the dishes. I'm gonna take the trash out. I'm gonna go, pull weeds, whatever that looks like. And it's a physical activity, but it's not necessarily heavy on the mind as far as mentally taxing. So you're able to do that and then go back into the practice session. I've also found that walks outside as well as reading fiction, believe it or not, really helps my mental abilities. Another thing would be deep breathing or some stretching activities. Keep a notepad in your practice time and in life for ideas that pop into your head. These can be musical ideas or patterns you want to work to or items to complete later. What you want to do is you want to put those somewhere and then you want to have a time when you come back to those and you categorize them so that at some point you can come back and work on them. The brain is a great place to have ideas. It's a horrible place to store ideas. It's going to keep reminding you until you get it out. So in your practice time, write that idea down, then close it and get back to what you were doing. Balanced life is the key to a successful drumming life. So if I'm spending all my time drumming and I got an unhappy marriage, that's gonna bleed over there. If I can't afford food, that's gonna bleed over into my drumming. We can't just make everything about drums. We have to balance this. I have what's called pillars in my life, and I'm constantly looking at it, and those pillars are gonna be like music and faith and family and my wife and income and career, all these. And if any one of them is out of balance, I've gotta bring the others up to that one so that they're all kind of stair steps within each other. I've got a ton of musician friends that have let the drumming and music came way out of balance, and everything else has just really gone down the drain. Keep it balanced. You're gonna enjoy it so much more. Limit the number of mentors you allow to speak into your life and ignore most everyone else. Vet those mentors really, really hard. Maybe that's somebody you don't even know. Maybe it's somebody that, you know what, I respect this person, I'm gonna listen and consume everything they have, but I'm gonna ignore these other people. You have to focus just on that input from a certain number of people, and people that you know and trust. So I have certain people that could show up at the door right now and say something to me pretty harsh, and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna think about that, because this person has spent years pouring into my life, and I really respect that. So if they came and said something to me about my playing, I would be like, okay, I really need to address that. But if it was some Joe Blow that I don't know off the street, guess what? I really don't care. The nice way of saying this old saying is opinions are like armpits. Everybody has them and they all stink. Limit who you let speak into your drumming life.